My name is Blaise McNeil. I'm what they call a safety advisor with the Nova Scotia Department of Labour, Skills and Immigration with the safety branch. I've been with the Department of Labour for about 17 years now in this new role as a safety advisor since May of 2022. It's a relatively new role. Myself and my colleague Sterling Kendall, who did the last webinar, are in this role. And basically it was created because the pandemic has really changed a lot of our lives. And we found during that time, especially with the public health orders seem to be changing on a regular basis, that some individuals or some organizations, particularly small businesses, usually don't have the human or financial resources to be able to help figure out and navigate, occupational health and safety and the different requirements and materials and things that are available. So that's one of our main focuses: are small businesses, newcomers and immigrants from Nova Scotia, as well as young workers and new businesses. So I'll get started here. So we'll look over at our session objectives for today. So I'm going to review the needs and content of an occupational health and safety policy and program, and talk about some of the triggers and what the requirements are for those. I'll talk a bit about and to help you understand the role of joint occupational health and safety committees and or health and safety representatives in workplaces. And also you'll learn about some of the free resources and training and other information that's available through the safety branch. First off, I'm going to talk a little bit about the internal responsibility system, and maybe Sterling may have covered this in his webinar, but basically the internal responsibility system is the foundation of the Occupational Health and Safety Act in Nova Scotia. We are actually the only jurisdiction in Canada that actually has the internal responsibility system explicitly written in our Occupational Health and Safety Act. So it's a very important piece of the Act, or of our legislation, I should say. And basically what it says is that everybody within the workplace is responsible for occupational health and safety. So whether you're the employer, an employee, a contractor, a supplier, an owner of a premise that's being used for a workplace, everyone has a responsibility for occupational health and safety, but is dependent on your authority and ability will really determine your responsibility for that workplace. It basically sort of forms a framework for participation, communication, and refusal of unsafe work. So there's a lot of moving parts within an occupational health and safety system, and that's what it is, the system of inspections, recognizing hazards, and I'll go into talk into more detail about that under programs and policy. And the last point I want to make is that the safety branch does not make workplaces safe. The role of the safety branch is to help people know and understand, the Act and the different regulations that are out there, the different codes, the standards, the guidelines that are out there to help you ensure that workplaces are healthy and safe. A role is to, promote the Act and the different regulations. We're there to assist what we call workplace parties. So those would be people like employers, employees, joint occupational health and safety committees, suppliers, engineers, all those folks who can impact workplace health and safety. And helping people to know and understand their responsibilities. When they don't carry out the roles and responsibilities, then we do what's called, intervening. So, and that, different interventions we have are things like issuing warnings, compliance orders, and even so far as the other end of the spectrum, prosecutions. So just to clarify, those are the roles of the Occupational Health and Safety Division. So two of the roles I want to talk about, as I mentioned, there's several of them, but the two I really want to focus on are the role of the employer and the role of the employee. Now, if you look at the role of the employer, under Section 13, they carry the greatest degree of responsibility because they have the greatest degree of control over the workplace. So they have a lot more duties and precautions that are required of them under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. And employees are a critical role within the workplace health and safety. Employees are typically the people at the front end, the front line, are more apt to get hurt at a workplace, more apt to see the hazards that exist in a workplace. And sort of another role within Section 17, but we don't explicitly define it within our own act, is the role of supervisors. And they're really important because supervisors are sort of the go-between between the employer and the employee. They help to direct the work of employees, to sort of the ear, the eyes of the employer. Their influence and their authority and their example is really important so that employees know that what they need to do in a workplace to make sure that they're healthy and safe. We'll talk a little bit about the employer. So as I mentioned, under Section 13, and this is, right under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, it must ensure that the health and safety of everyone at or near the workplace. So it talks about persons at or near the workplace, and it's really important to, when you're going through the act and looking at the wording in the legislation. Sometimes you'll see it talks about employees, sometimes it talks about persons. And I mentioned before, an employer potentially could have a supplier on site, or they could have a contractor, constructor, who aren't employees of that employer. However, they are persons, and they're at your workplace, and what you do or don't do at your workplace could potentially affect their health and safety. So that's why in the legislation you'll see sometimes the terminology employee used as well as the terminology persons. So just some of the precautions required by an employer to ensure the health and safety of the workplace: provide and maintain equipment, machines, and tools, provide safety instruction and training for employees, ensure employees are made familiar with hazards in the workplace, and ensure employees are not exposed to health and safety hazards. And some of the duties of the employer: to cooperate with the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee or Health and Safety Representative, whichever exists in your workplace. And I'll talk a bit about what the requirements are for those. To comply with the Occupational Health and Safety Act and the regulations, and to develop an occupational health and safety policy and a program where required. And again, I'll go into more details about that. So under Section 17, this is the section that pertains to employees in a workplace. So employees must take every precaution that is reasonable to ensure the health and safety of others and themselves. And they must cooperate with the Health and Safety Committee or Health and Safety Representative, whoever's exists in your workplace, and also with fellow employees. Ensure that all protective devices, equipment, or clothing are properly used, and make sure that they're trained in using those, and not only how to use them, but also how to maintain them properly. They also must comply with the Act and the regulations and report all hazards immediately to a supervisor. And it's really important that employees understand that within the Occupational Health and Safety Act, under the Internal Responsibility System, if you have a concern or you see a condition in your workplace that you believe may be a hazard to your health or your safety, you are required under Section 17 to report it to your supervisor immediately. So it's really important to do that, because you need to give the supervisor the opportunity to make things right. As I mentioned, employees are the folks who are at the front line of a workplace. They're more apt to see the hazards in a workplace. They're more apt to get injured potentially in a workplace. So it's really important that they understand their role in making sure that they report it to the supervisor immediately, give them a chance, to make things right. As part of that process, there are other people involved. I will talk about that for health and safety committees or health and safety representatives. So we'll talk a little bit about an occupational health and safety policy. So if you have 5 or more employees regularly employed, and regularly employed is defined in the Occupational Health and Safety Act in the definition section, and it means predictably recurring period of employment that exceeds at least 4 weeks. So if you have someone who's regularly employed, count the number of employees. If you have 5 or more, you require what's called an occupational health and safety policy. And there's 3 things that you require in your health and safety policy at your workplace. These things express the employer's commitment to health and safety. Things like why you're committed to health and safety in the workplace. The commitment of the employer to cooperate with, whether you have a health and safety committee in your workplace or a health and safety representative, that you're committed to cooperating with them, and to sort of lay out in general the responsibilities of the employer, supervisors, and other employees in fulfilling the requirements of your health and safety policy. So next I'm going to talk about, there we are. So I'm going to talk about the components of an occupational health and safety program. The health and safety program is required where you have 20 more employees are regularly employed by an organization. So if you look at the previous slide when we talked about a policy is never employees at a workplace. So within a workplace, and this is about within the organization. So there's 8 basic requirements required under an occupational health and safety program. So you must, again, if you have 20 or more employees, you must prepare and maintain, and it's really important that that keyword is maintaining, a written occupational health and safety program that provides for training and supervision of employees, preparing written safe work procedures as they relate to health and safety, establishing a joint occupational health and safety committee or health and safety representative, and as I said, I'll get into more detail about where those are required. Establishing a hazard identification program, because basically that's what it comes down to. One is, regardless of the workplace, whether you're working in retail, you work in healthcare, you're working in construction, all kinds of workplaces have hazards. So it's really important that people understand that that's sort of the crux or the foundation of health and safety is, preventing people from getting injured or getting ill at work, and making sure you're sharing that information and making sure you do things about it. Like, and how do you do that? You identify hazards that may obviously, exist depending on the type of work that your business does, but also identifying hazards as things progress. So as you do a particular procedure or you're doing particular work within your organization, you may create other hazards. So it's really important that it's not just the ones that are pre-existing, but ones that could be created that are identified. Really important that you monitor the follow-up and control of the hazards. So like through inspections, and okay, once you identify a hazard, what are you going to do about it? Well, you need to sort of, okay, what are our priorities here? And how are we going to fix it? And what corrective actions are we going to put in place? Make sure you establish an accident an investigation system. So again, if you have incidents or accidents at your workplace, you want to make sure that you do something about it so that, it doesn't happen to somebody else in the future, or it doesn't become something more serious the next time around. You need to make sure that you maintain statistics and records in your workplace. So depending on if you have a health and safety committee, you'll have to have health and safety minutes of your meetings of your committee. And lastly, you want to monitor how the program is being implemented and its effectiveness. And this is basically you're auditing your program. So you want to look at your program to make sure that, okay, what we have written in our program, is that actually working within our organization? You don't want to put all this time and effort and money into developing a written health and safety program and then put it up on the shelf and then never look at it again. So it's really important. It's for your benefit. It's for the benefit of you, your organization, and your employees. So it's really important that you look at that on a regular basis to make sure, okay, are all these different 8 elements within our work, our health and safety program, working as we've intended? So I'm just going to show you a couple of resources to help you along with this your journey on developing a policy and a written health and safety program. So we have a couple of tools here. One is the safety manual. I'll talk about the safety toolkit first. So basically the safety toolkit was developed, it was a joint initiative between us and the Workers' Compensation Board of Nova Scotia. And basically the safety toolkit is to help you put a health and safety system in place, protect your workers and yourself from injury and illness at work. It's going to help you to learn your basic duties and responsibilities under the Nova Scotia Occupational Health and Safety Act and regulations, and then help you understand how health and safety plays a role in the day-to-day operations of your business. For health and safety purposes, we define a small business as well with 90 and fewer employees. Details on why that is. No matter what your payroll is or how much annual revenue you have, that's how we define what we call a small business. And you can see the QR code there, sort of in the middle of the screen. That's a QR code for the Small Business Safety Toolkit. So if you scan that QR code, and I believe I'm going to be supplying these slides after this webinar, so you'll be able to scan it then as well. But basically, that'll take you to a PDF version of the Small Business Safety Toolkit. But you can also access a digital version of the Small Business Toolkit, and it breaks it down into the different modules and sections within the toolkit that you can sort of do online, sort of do it digitally. And the second resource we have here is called the Safety Manual for Businesses. This, again, helps to provide useful instructions to employers on a variety of topics, such as what is required by law to ensure workplace health and safety, along with some really valuable templates of necessary safety documentation. Documentation is very important in occupational health and safety because it helps to form part of your due diligence, and I believe that's something that Strong talked about in detail in the first webinar. The manual is designed to be easy to use and provide non-existing businesses with the general knowledge of what is expected of them as an employer and what the rights and responsibilities of employees are. The manual was created by the Spring Garden Business Area Association with funding from our Occupational Health and Safety Education Trust Fund. I'll talk a little bit about that trust fund later as well. You can find the manual for visitors in English and French, and it's on the publications page of our website. So if you scan that QR code to the left, that'll actually take you to our website, and you can find that under the heading of guidelines and other documents. It's a great resource to help you, again, with developing a program and the health and safety system within your organization. So we're going to flip back here and talk a little bit about joint occupational health and safety committees and health and safety representatives. So why are these so important? Well, as I mentioned, depending on the size of your organization, it's really important to have a committee or a health and safety representative because you're not expected to do this alone. Like, no one individual is going to know all of the operations, what's going on within your organization. No one person is going to be able to provide, to be able to control the behaviors. And basically it's not the only thing that determines outcomes in health and safety, but it's certainly a big part of it because you're dealing with human beings, and human beings have certain behaviors and attitudes. And the last thing is, no one individual knows about the functions of the entire system. And as I mentioned, it's a system of communication, it's a system of identifying hazards, it's a system of inspections and putting in corrective action. So it's really important to have these roles. And as I said at the beginning, they're really important there for helping to identify hazards. They're a critical check and balance between the employer and employees. And the Health and Safety Committee and the Health and Safety representatives are not the doers of health and safety. And yes, there are some functions of the Health and Safety Rep and Committee that I'll talk about in a minute. But they're really sort of the watchdog or the auditors of the health and safety system within your organization. So when is the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee required? So if you have 20 more persons, and again, you see that keyword there, are regularly employed at a workplace, or 20 more persons regularly employed at a construction project, this triggers your requirement to have a Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee. So again, and this pertains to the physical location. So at your workplace, sort of within the four walls, that's what you're looking at. Or if our executive director within the Occupational Health and Safety Division determines that, you should have a safety committee, even if you don't meet that, the minimum benchmark of 20. And just another key point is to make it so the employer is responsible for forming the committee. Part of having a head committee is having a health and safety committee is part of the employer's responsibility and right to participate. And on your committee, you have to have at least 50% of the members on your committee have to be non-management. And so when is a health and safety representative required? When you have 5 to 19 people are regularly employed at a workplace, or 5 to 9 people are regularly employed at a construction project, or if our executive director within the Occupational Health and Safety Division issues an order for a workplace to have a health and safety representative. And the health and safety representative cannot be connected to management, so they can't have any sort of management function. They can't have the ability to hire or fire or discipline employees in any way. And the reason for that, as I mentioned, the health and safety representative is sort of the go-to or the ears and eyes of sort of representing the interests of the employees. So for obvious reasons, you wouldn't want to have somebody who's connected to management because, employees may be fearful of, going to the health and safety representative with a concern. As I mentioned before, it's required by employees, if you have a health and safety concern, to go to your supervisor directly. But not everybody's comfortable in going to the supervisor. Not every supervisor is approachable. So this way, again, whether you have a committee or you have a health and safety representative, you can use that person to bring forward any concerns or issues you may have regarding health and safety. We'll talk a little bit about the functions of the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee and the Health and Safety Representative. So as I mentioned, identifying the hazards within the workplace around health and safety, when we talk about health and safety, and sometimes we really focus on the safety side of health and safety, but there is a health component to it, and that really became pretty evident for all of us during the pandemic. You know, it is a health issue, and there's lots of health issues out there in workplaces. There could be air quality issues, and that could be from, you know, maybe you have water leakage in a workplace, and then that can lead to mold growth, and that can affect, you know, workplace air quality, and that can affect folks in a workplace who may have respiratory sensitivity. So it's really important that people not just focus on sort of the physical safety side of occupational health and safety, but the health side of health and safety as well. The functions of the committee and the representative are to audit compliance with the safety requirements. So looking at your program, making sure that you're doing everything the program says. You know, are we doing our inspections that we're supposed to be doing? Are we doing planned inspections? Are we doing, you know, ad hoc inspections? What do they look like? Investigation and prompt disposition of matters of complaints. So if there's concerns or issues that come up in the workplace, make sure that, you know, your committee members or your health and safety representative have real involvement in those, and making sure that, again, looking at that to say, okay, what, you know, the intent of an investigation is to look at to say, not to blame, you know, this isn't, you know, blaming the victim to point fingers and lay blame at one individual or individuals, but to look at, okay, so what happened, kind of look at the root cause of why something occurred. And there's never usually one single reason why something occurred in a workplace with respect to an incident or an accident. So it's really important that people understand the role and how to conduct an investigation, and all that information is available in the two resources I talked about, the manual and the toolkit. So participating in inspections, inquiries, and investigations. As I mentioned, it's really important that, you know, joint occupational health and safety committee members and health and safety representatives get training in this as well. It's not just an inherent knowledge to folks of, you know, how do I do an investigation or how do I do an inspection. Lots of good information in that manual and the small business toolkit I mentioned earlier. Advising on individual protective devices, equipment, and clothing. So if, you know, you require protective gloves at a workplace, or you need a particular piece of personal protective equipment like protective footwear or eyewear, you want to make sure that you involve your committee members or your health and safety representative get involved in those decisions. You know, you don't always want to go with the cheapest, you know, protective eyewear, because employees may not wear it. Like if they're very uncomfortable and they're just not functioning properly, you know, it kind of defeats the purpose. You spent this money on this piece of equipment that's going to protect your employees. So it's, you know, really important that you get people involved to help make those decisions. You don't always go with, you know, the least expensive item. Advising the employer regarding the policy or program, and that's a requirement every year. When you have a health and safety policy, you're supposed to review it at least once a year, and where you have a committee or where you have a health and safety representative, make sure that they're part of reviewing that policy as well. And also your program, you want to make sure that, as I mentioned, there's 8 different elements to a written occupational health and safety program. So over, you know, within your own program, you can decide how often are we going to complete a full audit of our program to make sure that all those parts and pieces that make up our health and safety system are functioning properly. So you may take 2 elements every couple of months to review it and look over it, and over the course of the year, okay, we've reviewed our program, or maybe want to do it over a couple of years. Or it's really important that you know, don't just write this program or get it written by someone, pay a consultant to do it for you, and then put it in the binder, say, hey, put it up on the shelf so it's ready for, you know, if the Department of Labor comes by, they're going to do an inspection and ask us for our program, then we can probably show them it in our binder. Well, again, you're not doing that for the benefit of the Department of Labor, that's for the benefit of you or your employees. Something should be a living document that you're using on a regular basis. The other function is investigating work refusals, and both parties, whether you're a committee or a health and safety representative, will look into a work refusal up to a certain point. So with a work refusal, employees can go to their employer if they have a health and safety concern about something that's going to affect, you know, if they have reasonable belief that something endangers their health and safety or the health and safety of an employee, they can exercise the right to refuse. And that could be because of a piece of equipment, could be because there's guarding missing, it could be because they don't have the necessary training. So all these things could trigger a work refusal. The only people who can determine whether a work refusal is finished and can make a decision for an employee to return back to work is the committee. And an individual like a health and safety representative does not have that authority or ability to do that. So that's just, I just want to make that distinction. So if it doesn't get resolved at the committee level, or with a health and safety representative, then it can go to the Department of Labor, and one of our occupational health and safety officers will get involved and continue on and make a decision on the work refusal. And then the last thing is, again, this only applies to the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee, is maintaining records and minutes of committee meetings. So it's really important, you know, at a minimum, the committee is supposed to meet once a month. It's really important that you maintain minutes of your meetings so people know what's been going on with the committee. If you're reviewing, or you should be reviewing, any incidents or near misses that occur in your workplace, making sure that they're being followed through, that there's corrective action being put into place. So it's really important that you maintain records. As I mentioned before, records, documentation is a big part of your due diligence, because you have to be able to show, you know, unfortunately, if you ever end up, you know, being prosecuted for a serious incident or heaven forbid a fatality in your workplace, that you need to be able to demonstrate to the courts that you took every precaution reasonable in the circumstance. But for other reasons, you know, this incident occurred. So it's really important that you document things like inspections and training and toolbox talks and those sorts of things. So now I'm going to move on and talk about some of the occupational health and safety resources and training that are available to employers, employees, and workplaces through the safety branch. So a couple of documents you see here. One is the Employer's Guide for Communicable Diseases. This is available both in English and in French. And this was developed, of course, in response to the COVID pandemic. And it was developed by a team of our colleagues in the technical services section of the Occupational Health and Safety Division. So it's a several-page document, and just helps employers to understand that, you know, COVID is probably not going to be the last pandemic that we're going to encounter here in Nova Scotia or around the world for that matter. So it's really important that people are prepared for other communicable diseases that may occur in your workplace, and what to do about that. And the other document is a workplace first aid guide. This is also available in English and French. And so the first aid regulations changed in June of 2022. And basically we changed those so that they harmonize with other jurisdictions across Canada, because other jurisdictions have moved to using what's called a CSA standard, not only for what we have to put in our first aid kits now, but also for the types of training that are out there. So we used to have emergency, I believe it was emergency level, standard and advanced levels of first aid training. And now I think they're called basic, intermediate, and maybe advanced training. So some of the terminology has changed a bit. Some of the triggers for, you know, the number of first aid kits you required in a workplace, or the level of first aid training that's required in a workplace. Before it was just if you had a certain number of employees per shift. Now we're looking at things like even if you have a remote workplace that comes into effect, as well as whether you're working in an office setting or other. So there's other things that will trigger the types of, or the levels of first aid training required in a workplace, as well as the type and number of first aid kits you require. So just to give you a little heads up on the training or the changes that were made in the first aid regulations. And if you look at that QR code there, you scan that, and that'll take you to these two documents under our guidelines and publications page. So the next resources I want to talk about are some of our what we call pocket cards, and our rack cards, and some of our wallet cards we have. So we have these resources in multiple languages. So as you can see, we have them in Arabic, simplified Chinese, Spanish, Mi'kmaq, Hindi, French, Portuguese, and a couple of new ones we have are Ukrainian and Russian, and English, of course, as well. So the pocket card that you see sort of almost in the middle of the screen where it has French written under it, So this on one side of the card, or on the left side of the card, it talks about your rights. And then on the right side of the card, it talks about your responsibilities. And then on the back side of the card, it has our toll-free number where you can contact the safety branch, and also our email address. So if you wanted to send us an email about any questions or concerns you have regarding health and safety. And there's also a line in the back of that card there to put down the name of either health and safety committee member or your health and safety representative in your workplace. It's a nice little convenient, tangible piece of card to have on hand, just just to reference again to sort of jog your memory about your rights and your responsibilities. And then we have to the right of that is our fridge magnets. It has our toll-free number, which is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And also the card below that is what we call our wallet card. And the other two cards, so the taller cards in the middle, are around practical safety. So we have just to remind people, you see the elevator shaft there, and there's a tripping hazard with some uneven flooring. So if you see that in a public place, it's not just about a workplace. You could be out somewhere and you see a hazard. We encourage you to contact the safety branch and say, hey, I noticed this on my outing, I was shopping or what have you, or at a workplace, and I'm just wanted to report this and make sure somebody's aware of this tripping hazard. So that's why we put that information there. We just want to give courage to, don't just turn a blind eye to it. Even if it's not your workplace, make sure you report it to someone. And the next resources are, we have a couple of safety videos that we produced within the last year. One is on the internal responsibility system. It's a short 2-minute video, and it talks about the IRS and the roles and responsibilities of the different individuals. It sort of uses a sort of a analogy of sort of a team, and team captain and the players and what have you. So I think it's a good short video. It's something you could use as part of your training program in your workplace for your employees, just again to sort of jog their memory and just so they're constantly aware of they have rights, but also they have responsibilities with regard to health and safety. And the other video is what to expect when an occupational health and safety officer shows up at your workplace. This video is about 4 minutes long. And those two individuals you see there are actually two of our occupational health and safety officers. They are not actors. And both of these videos are available closed captioned in Arabic, French, Hindi, Mandarin, Mi'kmaq, Portuguese, Russian, Spanish, and Ukrainian. And again, the two QR codes are on the bottom of the screen there. You scan those QR codes, and that'll take you through the links for these videos. And the next resource is NovaSafe, and I'm going to play this short video.
When you're stepping up safely for your job, use the NovaSafe app. Safety information made simple. A message from the Government of Nova Scotia.
So NovaSafe is what we call a progressive web app. We created that because Nova Scotia have told us that they want easier access to safety information, including the regulations, the codes, the safety awareness materials that I showed you previously, as well as any safety alerts and notifications that we have out there. It hosts relevant, up-to-date information on topics concerning health and safety of every worker in Nova Scotia, and technical safety information as well, required by workers, owners, and constructors. NovaSafe has its own Nova Scotia look and feel, and it can be used across all sectors and industries in Nova Scotia. So we launched this in May of this year, actually, 2023, and you can access it from any cell phone, tablet, laptop, or a desktop. And again, it's designed to provide clear guidance to workplaces about what they need to know about occupational health and safety at the push of a button. So I'll go to the next screen there. So when you go into NovaSafe, and as I mentioned from the previous QR code there, if you scan that, whether you're using an iPhone or an Android device, it'll prompt you to put it on your home screen. And as I mentioned, it's what we call a progressive web app. So it's not something that you would download from the App Store. It's something that you would have on your phone, and you would require access to the internet to be able to access it. So when you go into the NovaSafe app, for this example, I just typed in safety program as sort of a keyword search. You'll have sort of 3 tabs that you can access. So it gives you a summary of the topic on the far left. In the middle, the yellow arrow there, it talks about the legislation. and what the legislation says with respect to that particular topic. And then the last arrow on the right-hand side there is about all the different resources that you can access that are related to that topic as well. So it's a really great resource. I really encourage everyone to load it to your phone. I mean, these devices that we use, that's a powerful thing. There's lots of information. I know it's great to be able to, I like it for the simple fact that you can search by keyword. You don't have to, I know in my role previously as an inspector, I had, binders full of written material, paper material, and have to sort of thumb through things to find a particular answer or what have you, or information. This is just so portable. It's a really great resource. I encourage you to use it. The other resource that I mentioned earlier is the Occupational Health and Safety Education Trust Fund. So this trust fund supports education, training, promotion, and other activities to build awareness and knowledge of occupational health and safety, to reduce the risk of injury and build positive workplace safety culture. Funding for the program comes from fines, administrative penalties, and court-ordered payments for violations of the Occupational Health and Safety Act and regulations. And as I mentioned before, this fund was used by the Spring Garden Road Business Association to develop that manual. So folks, if any of you, want to get together as an organization, say, hey, we have a great idea for something that would really benefit the chamber with respect to occupational health and safety, I strongly encourage you, scan that QR code. That'll take you to a reference guide that that our team in awareness and outreach developed to help you sort of go through the application process and to access funds through that trust fund. So really encourage you to use that resource as well. So I know people want to ask or want to know, how can I access free health and safety resources and courses through the safety branch? So as a resident of Nova Scotia, you can access up to 5 free courses every year through the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety. Right now, there's about 32 courses that are available online. And then you can also access free women's training online through Skills Online NS. I'm just going to press there we are. So I was sort of missing a QR code. So as I mentioned, there are other courses through CCOHS as well, but right now we have about 32 of them that are available through the safety branch. And we look at those every year to see, okay, what is sort of the highest uptake? And if there's a course that's really not that popular with folks, maybe we'll drop that and replace it with something else. So we're constantly looking at that list to update it and keep it sort of in tune with what people are looking for with respect to training in workplaces. So in order to access that training, you go to our URL that you see there at the top of the page, and at the yellow arrow, and it'll take you, you go to this URL, it'll take you to this page, which is our training page. You click on that CCOHS Nova Scotia OHS training link, and you'll have to create an account. And then once you have the account, that's all you need. And again, you can sign up for either the 5 free courses that we offer, or you can also take some other courses that are sort of that require payment as well through CCOHS. And here's a list of some of the courses that we've seen over the past few years that are the most popular. So orientation to occupational health and safety for new workers, fire safety, the basics, hazard and risk identifying, assessing, controlling, and evaluating hazards, ladder safety, health and safety committees, occupational health and safety management systems, workplace inspections, working at heights and introduction, personal protective equipment, the basics, and preventing falls from slips and trips. And some more resources. As you can see, folks, the safety branch has lots of resources available to workplaces. We really want people to be healthy and safe in your workplace, and that's why we have all these available. So the QR code there at the far left is a link to our safety branch contact list. And also this enables you to get an advanced copy of our signal. So this is a newsletter that we put out quarterly. It's put out only in English at the moment. So you can access that. You can get on our contact list as well. So for things like any safety bulletins, any safety notices that we put through our safety notification system, anything out there that may be related to a particular industry or sector or piece of equipment, these bulletins and safety notices, they typically come out through our technical safety folks. And it's a great means, again, to just stay on top of things. The signal is a great resource, I think, for your health and safety committees or your health and safety representatives. If you want to do safety talk with your employees. There's lots of great ideas in there and other resources for you to use. And a couple other things I just want to cover is, so this is our Make the Right Call campaign. We've been running this for a few years. So if you've seen something unsafe, whether it's in your own workplace or a public space, we encourage you to call the toll-free number, 1-800-9-LABOR, 1-800-952-2687, or send us an email to safetybranch@novascotia.ca. And this system is 100% confidential. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So typically, if you call the toll-free number or you send an email, you'll get in touch with one of what we call our information specialists. They may ask you for your name and number. You're not obligated to provide it. And the only reason for that is because I know from my previous experience as an inspector, sometimes we don't get a whole lot of information with respect to a concern or a complaint that we see from the public. So we may want to follow up with that person, but as I said, you're not obligated to give your name or contact information. It's just they'll ask you if you would like to or not. And they'll also even ask you if you want an officer to follow up with you, just to let you know sort of what transpired as far as your concern that you got for it. So I just want you to be aware of that service that's available as well. And here's some other ways to get in touch with us. You can visit our website there at novascotia.ca. The next one is the Work Safe for Life. That's a joint initiative between us and the Workers' Compensation Board of Nova Scotia. Next is the URL for the NovaSafe app to be able to download that, and to also be able to access it through like a PC or a desktop or a laptop. You can also follow us on YouTube. You can find not only those 2 videos I mentioned earlier, but a couple of other safety videos, and we'll be putting out a few more in 2024. And you can also keep up to date on safety matters by following us on @NS_labor skills. And the last thing I want to mention, folks, is we're currently engaged in a couple of engagements. Again, this is a joint initiative between us and the Workers' Compensation Board of Nova Scotia. The 2 engagements are on preventing workplace harassment and the Workers' Compensation System Review. So they started back on November 14th, but they're still ongoing. And they're open to anyone who registers. So there's still some in-person sessions that are going right now across the province as well. You can participate by participating in one of the virtual sessions, as well as filling out the survey. The in-person and the online sessions, they run for about 1 hour and 15 minutes, and there's a 30-minute break. So the first session is on preventing workplace harassment, and then there's a 30-minute break, and then they move into the Workers' Compensation System Review. And again, you don't have to sign up for both sessions. You can sign up for either or both. So it's really up to you. And as you see online there's a variety of morning and afternoon sessions that are still available. So I just wanted people to be aware of that, and to, really, it's a really important, subject, preventing workplace harassment. We've had violence in the workplace regulation since 2007. I believe we were the only jurisdiction right now in Canada, across Canada, that does not address harassment in our health and safety legislation. So, we've been very progressive in other aspects of occupational health and safety, and other aspects not so much. So it's really important, and I really encourage everyone to get involved and voice your concerns and your opinions and your views about harassment in the workplace, as well as the Workers' Compensation System Review. And I think that's it for me, folks. I think it's about almost 10:02. Thank you, everyone, for your time. And I think there might be a couple of questions there, Will, in the Q&A. I don't know if I can look at those or read them or.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Blaze. The information was very helpful, and thank you for the resources you shared with us. We scanned a few QR codes and we got the PDF version. Very helpful. We may just print them out and circulate in the office. So we have time for a question here. Let's see if anybody wants to ask a question. Ask a question for Blaze. If not, we have questions people submit in front, ahead of this section. So Blaze, in your experience, what are some common challenges businesses face when trying to establish a safe and compliant work environment, and how can these challenges be overcome?
Well, I think the biggest challenge I've seen is they kind of get overwhelmed. They think like it's, they kind of look at the whole thing at once. And it's like, wow, this is a lot of information. How am I going to do this? But, you don't need to do it alone. That's why it's really important to engage, whether you're, require a health and safety representative or you require a committee in your workplace, depending on the size of your workplace. Really engage your employees to help you with your health and safety system, because that's what it's about. It's about identifying hazards. We're not expecting employers to know everything about all four corners of their organization, their workplace, and how everything works, 100%. So that's why you really need to rely on your frontline people and really listen, pay attention to what's going on, really engage them, help them, get them involved, because there's things that you just not see. Like somebody may look at a situation and not see a hazard, but somebody over here may look at it and say, oh, what about that? Or what about this? So it's really important that people, you get people involved in communication. Communication is so important. Like that's one thing we don't talk about in the Act. I mean, there's a few things that we don't mention, but that's another thing is communication. It's really important that you communicate and find out from the people in your workplace what's their favorite way of communicating, whether it's text messages or email, or you want something in print format, or by law you have to have a written health and safety program. So it's really important that folks understand that we're trying to move digitally. We're not there yet, but at the very minimum, and again, keep that in mind, the Act and the regulations are the very bare minimum that's required within any sector. So whether you're in retail or healthcare, or it doesn't matter, that's the minimum standard for everyone. We certainly encourage workplaces to exceed it. I've encountered workplaces where by law they didn't require a written health and safety program, but I saw the value of having one because they were going to, bid on maybe some provincial contract or federal work, and those entities require you to have a health and safety program regardless of size of the workplace. So again, those are a couple of things that I've seen as challenges for workplaces over the years.
Awesome, thanks.
Yep.
Thank you. So we have two more questions here. One is, I'm working on setting up an OHS program at my organization. We are headquartered here in Halifax, but also have similar offices in New Brunswick and Newfoundland. Would we need to have a representative from each office on the OHS committee?
Well, again, the requirements for Nova Scotia are just for Nova Scotia. So depending on, how many, if you just have the one location in Nova Scotia and you have more than 5 employees, then you have to have a health and safety rep. If you have more than 20 employees at the location, then you're going to have a committee. I know there's been talk since I started with the Department of Labor back in 2006, we're trying to harmonize all of the health and safety legislation within Atlantic Canada, because we're seeing a movement in that direction. Like, as I mentioned earlier, the harmonization of first aid across Canada. And so we're looking at, because there's people move from province to province to province. So, we have different requirements for things like fall protection, even for committee. Like here in Nova Scotia, we tried a number of years ago to have health and safety committee training as mandatory, and it was stopped. There was just no appetite for it at the time. I believe there might be a couple of other provinces, maybe New Brunswick and even Newfoundland and Labrador, may have that requirement. So again, there's the discrepancy. But to answer the question, if you're large enough to require a representative or a committee in your one location in Nova Scotia, you have to have, the required number of people in place.
Cool. Thank you, Blaise. Another question, how can we define or clarify the different roles and responsibilities between supervisors and employers?
Okay. So as I mentioned, so supervisor is considered an employee under Section 17. As I mentioned, supervisor is not defined in the Act. However, there's several examples or references within the Act and the regulations that refer to supervisor. So as an example, an employee must report their concerns immediately to the supervisor. You could look to sort of a basic thing would be, anybody who controls work, directs work, or even controls a worker is considered a supervisor. So, people call them foreman, some people call them lead hand. So they're sort of the middle person between the employer and the employee. So they're sort of the ears and eyes of management. They sort of represent management to the employees. and to some degree, they represent the employees to management, and they almost have a dual role, but by law, they fall under Section 17 of the Act. So if you want sort of some guidance on what their responsibilities and duties are, look at Section 17, but also look at other jurisdictions, like look at New Brunswick, look at Newfoundland and Labrador, and say, do they define supervisor? And in general, what do they say is the role of supervisor?
Thank you, Blaise.
Yeah.
So one of the attendees wondering if you can share the PowerPoint with us, and we can share with other attendees.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah, at the end of this webinar, yeah, I'll send all the slides to yourself, Will, and yeah, you can distribute to your network. That would be great.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay,
Yeah.
I think we're about out of time right now. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar, and thank you so much to our speaker, Blaise, for your time today. So upcoming, we have a last webinar in this safety series coming up on December 12th. And we're going to talk about the benefits of having a safety framework for your business. And finally, our last launching for this year from Halifax Chamber of Commerce is with Minister Law on housing in this December 13th. At the launching, Minister Law will discuss the 5-year housing plan launched by the provincial government recently and the government's strategy for implementation. So I encourage everyone to get your tickets at halifaxchamber.com/events. And this webinar will was recorded and will be available to all attendees shortly on our YouTube channel. That's it for today, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you, Blaise, again. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
It's my pleasure. Stay safe, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.